Well, cold today, ain't it, guys? It's 20 after 20 in the morning, West Coast time. It's the November 1st, 2023. It's Wednesday, as we Regency, Roseman, California. Shout out to Artist in Recovery, Mr. Daryl. What's going on? It's a pullout of yours. One particular topic that you failed to mention that maybe you had some working knowledge of? And is this regarding Israel, or is this something about other things? You're putting your feet in the water and dangling them in there. Hmm. This kind of topic, I don't cross. After my brother passed away, I generally don't get into it. My brother would be the one, only expert, who could talk about such things like this. Only he could talk about the aspects of it, and I generally didn't. At one time, my brother had been in the military. That much is certain. Still got a copy of his DD 214. And the thing is, his particular history, I barely talked about regarding his military experience. Not just because I might have people out there who are looking for stolen valor. My brother had talked to people in the community. He was part of that community a long time ago. And unfortunately, things he did in the military got him kicked out of the community. Through circumstances, he found himself being part of the teams going through the training. There have been people to verify it. Unfortunately, they're dead due to death, disease, and time took them out. So I only know the stories. Only I have the stories now. My brother, when he was going through boot over at San Diego Recruitment Training Center back in the 70s, when he still actually had an operating school for up and coming military boots going through the process. During a week of processing registration, getting themselves orientated into the beginning of Navy life, he punched out his company commanding officer's face. My brother had some martial arts training when he was a kid, growing up as a teenager. He needed something as an outlet, and he had a sponsor during those days. Not like what we have for 12 step. No, this is a different program altogether. There was a guy named George Bouvier. God rest his soul. I think he was working part of a program here, and he was seeing my brother, and he was helping him out a great deal. Ma knew him. They were like the best of buddies. Guy was like a mentor. He was an adult. He was like in his 30s while my brother was in his teens. And they did things as a buddy would. Those kind of mentoring programs help a lot. I wasn't one of those. My brother was 8 years older than I was, so lucky him. And through the program, my brother actually had been taking martial arts classes. my brother also learned how to come out to the desert with him and shoot gun. Uh, Put up a can and turn it into Swiss metal. That was a long time ago. A long time ago. But my brother also benefited, as I said before, of the martial arts programs that they had. So my brother was taking a couple of forms. Karate, one of those two. Not kung fu, just karate. And he was good at it. He almost got into black belt and stopped. It's understood, at least back then, and I think today as well, when one reaches that level, one is registered. My brother felt uncomfortable about that. There are certain circumstances happened in his youth before, when I was born in those days, that made him angry a lot of things, and he had to get help. It kind of helped that they locked down the records, at least in the troubled youth anyway. But because of that, it would probably deny him a few things. And my brother had a dream of still going into the military. The story was, my brother got into the age of 9 or 10, and I was still a sickly kid. I stay home, my brother goes out and stays with the cousins. While out in Bell, the cousins take my brother out for a little beach. They go over to, I think, not Zuma, no, Balsa Chica. There are buoys out in Balsa Chica, off the coast. There are mile limits. My brother would be a strong swimmer when he was a young kid. Very strong. He swam out to the buoys and back. It scared the girls and scared the, oh, let's call that Rainy like crazy. It'd scare Uncle George. They'd have to explain it to Ma how come something happened to Dave. Yeah, something happened to my brother during that time. He went over to the buoy and got his leg caught in the chains. Sometimes he would sit out there for a few minutes, rest up, and just get back, fight the current, and just get back to shore. That would have been no problem. Except this time he couldn't get off the damn buoy because his legs got caught up in the chains. There are weights, and the way the currents were flowing, he was having a hard time struggling with the weights there. Fortunately, during that time, they actually had a Navy base out in Long Beach during those days. A SEAL UDT team was training off the coast. Swimming. They went to help. One of them got underneath my brother, saw the problem, released the weights a little bit, just loosened it up a bit so my brother could get his foot off. Instead of bringing him to shore, they brought him over to the Navy base, to where word was sent over to Aunt Renee and Uncle George that they can pick him up over there, safe and sound. Doc over there would check him out. He's found to be fine, resting comfortably, and sent to Uncle George and Aunt Renee. Unfortunately, they're on the obligatory. If anything happened to my brother, they still had to tell Ma, and Ma would still have a conniption fit, and she did. And then she had a conniption fit over my brother for that, for putting them and her through this damn mess. But in the process that my brother was going through over there, he discovered that he had a cousin who was in the Navy, who was in the United States Navy as a SEAL. And this particular cousin was David Cameron. Now, from what I heard about my own cousin here, distant as he was, in many ways, never did see the guy. Wish I had. I was too damn young to remember him. Story Wars concerning about him. He was one of those who got drafted, but instead of going into the combat unit, he had construction skills. So, construction battalion had him, the CBs. So he went over to the NOM during those days when the actions were going on. And he helped with construction of whatever that the Navy needed out there. Usually Quonset huts, tarmacs, anything else they needed to get built. He was part of the process of getting it built. And then he saw action happening over there that caught his interest a great deal. Something over there had changed him to where he was going to be needed, not just as a CB. That's a good job, though, by the way. If you had a construction job, you're going to be building things. And then you had the enemy coming in there, infiltrating the place and blowing the shit up, but that's about it. That's what war happens. No, he gets sent back to the States because he made a request, a transfer request from the CBs to the underwater demolition teams. Now, back in the 60s, President John F. Kennedy had heard about the special forces being created out of certain branches. The Army had the Green Beret. The Marines would be blended into, well, the Marines have already been blended into the United States Navy anyway. Air Force, they didn't have theirs. At least I didn't remember about that part. The Navy, the job for the Navy would be, and this was coming out of World War II, basically. Back in World War II, decades earlier, they had frogmen, specialized divers of the United States Navy who would plant explosives underwater. Would learn a few skills necessary for warfare, and they were successful. Combining a frogman with a guy who knows martial arts on how to kill with his hands and kill with weapons, and they're the kind of techniques that they would have. Quiet, infiltrate, sneaky as hell. They'd get the job done, regardless. Green Beret were formed, and also the United States UDT / SEALs. Sea, air, and land. That acronym meant that they can go under the water, over the water. They can fight on land. But it doesn't mean they had jetpacks and fight in the air. No, it just means that they drop into territory like 10 or 20, 30. There's certain height levels that we're talking about in the caves. Even lower than that if they had to. They would infiltrate, find their target, take care of the target, and get the hell out. And then they would leave a guy behind. That was always a model right there. Easy day was yesterday. Sometimes I wonder if the easy day was yesterday or day before yesterday. And you still had to deal with the shit. And SEALs don't quit because they don't. They had their own training bases out there. One of them was hooked up with San Diego. My brother's interest was caught up with the SEALs because his cousin David Cameron came out of the training base they actually had set up, and for 2 years or 2 tours in Vietnam, his job originally was to build, and now his job was to destroy. And he was so good at the damn thing that he had got his name engraved with the Seabees and with the SEALs in their earlier days. I actually had met an original, of one of the original teams that they actually had out there a long time ago. My brother and I met him at a stand down. They called him the lieutenant. His first name was Don. I never read his last name. He was old, spry, tougher than shit, and looked at me sometimes and kept wondering why the hell I was there in the first place. But once you get past his exterior, he was a decent guy to deal with. I was sorry when he passed away. Broke my brother's heart. Before he passed, and this was after Ma passed, Ma had an electric wheelchair. We donated to him. Got around. There was a time when I met this guy. I thought he was full of hot air until I saw other veterans out there. Gave this guy respect, a great deal of it. They would have breakfasts at a local restaurant out in Lancaster. Uh, Certain days that they could get in, veterans would eat for free or half off, depending on the day that they actually had it. If it was at the end of the month, they would eat for free. And these guys always gave him a bit of respect. Sometimes they'd chide his ass, but I always gave him respect. I was lost every time I kept going to these veteran gatherings because I felt like I was an intruder, but they also had families over there too. And families actually didn't understand all that much about the military, only what the guys could talk about. Didn't matter which particular branch. They always held things back because civilians had no clue and wasn't supposed to have a clue on some occasions. It's a tight-knit community, being a veteran. Especially if you're assigned to overseas combat. I'd seen a lot of Vietnam veterans. Hell, when I was a student going to high school, I saw World War I and World War II veterans. But they didn't talk about themselves all that much. They just enjoyed the students' companies. So we played fish all the time. They wanted to play poker, but we had to play fish. David Cameron had survived his tour of duties, came back to the States, lived in Wyoming, Rock Springs, if I'm not mistaken. No, that was a different one altogether on that one. I remember he was a deputy and then a sheriff, and then he passed away. Had his own farm, tractor overturned, crushed to death. Hell of a way to die. He didn't get shot to death. He gets crushed to death by a damn farm equipment, a tractor on him. My brother and I had, before we moved out of the San Fernando Valley, we had taken a trip over to Point Hueneme They actually had a SEAL base. Not a, They had a CB base over there. It was CB days over there, and then they had an LST over there for demonstration purposes in their docks. My brother and I looked at the museum, and we also looked outside. There was a memorial tribute, walls inscribed with fallen CBs in there, and we saw David Cameron's name. Unfortunately, the SEAL community also has their own museum, but on the East Coast, somewhere in the south southwest, actually the south southeast area. I have yet to go across the country to travel to see these things. I'd seen the Wyoming, but if the public was allowed to go to the SEAL Museum, I'd love to see it. Getting back to my brother was impressed so much. My brother was a screw up during those days, but after meeting his cousin, he had to get himself fixed, basically. No trouble, no talking back to Ma. Get your grades up like crazy. And the process, George Bouvier and Dave connected, and Dave went through the martial arts. So he had training during those days. He was getting discipline. And man, he needed it. My brother was a fighter. My brother was a protector. He didn't cause trouble unless trouble was causing things around him. Then he had to get involved in the thing. But he wasn't out there to hurt anybody or breaking and entering or anything else like that. No, no, that wasn't him. That wasn't my big brother. Some of the records that my brother had, the run-ins that he had with the law, were sealed. Happens when you're youth. Some things happen and the court records are sealed, so they don't interfere with the adult stages of their lives. And some things actually were on record. My brother had connections. We had an uncle. Through processes, my brother was actually able to get into the military. He got into the United States Navy. My mother and I, down in Hollywood, were saying goodbye to him. He left in 76. 76, 77. I'm a young kid. I didn't want to see my brother go. My brother would have been graduating. Actually, my brother did graduate out of high school. He was going in the Navy, so they graduated him a few months earlier. My mother never liked the idea of my brother going into the military. But my brother made the choice, and she had to live with it. But she was pissed off about it, but she wasn't going to seal him off entirely from the family. No, but she was worried about him. Besides, at home we still had to deal with a grandma and still dealing with an elderly aunt, and then had to deal with me and my own damn health issues. So what else is new? So we said goodbye to him over at the AV's building. There was a processing center out there, and we said goodbye to him at the curb. It's about 4 o'clock in the morning. We're going to get a morning bite to eat during that time. Went over to Denny's nearby, grabbed chow, and went back home. Dave never did tell us about the SEAL situation until God knows when. Ma heard about it, but she didn't believe him until he started showing his buds. He was showing his Budweiser. There's an image of it online for this one. You've probably seen it. Probably in theatrics and also television, movies. My brother actually bought one. Blood, sweat, and tears on that one. Busted his ass in 3 faces on this one. This was crazy for my brother. This was damn crazy. You don't punch out a company commander in your first week of buds. You don't. You're going to get tossed out in the air with a dishonorable, or worse. You actually have a few officers and non-coms who swear my brother could be an asset. My brother was given the choice. You'd be a non-U.S. citizen with a dishonorable discharge, and that's what it means. Or you survive 3 phases of the United States Navy in its training program called Sea, Air, and Land. Three phases to survive through. During the time when my brother's company was getting graduated, my brother also was graduating out of the SEALs, surviving 3 phases, and he gets his Budweiser. Ma and I only see the boot camp of the Navy. SEALs was a different story altogether. My uncle who pulled strings, and was a favorite uncle of ours. A long story on this gentleman here, too. I loved him a great deal. In a way, I think I owed him one. I think I owed my uncle one. He tried to keep my brother out of trouble. I hate it decades later he passes away, but Morris Cameron. Uncle Bill, he was called. I called him Uncle Bill. Ma called him Billy. There's a long story about this gentleman. And he was surprised when my brother had survived the 3 phases. And then after that, he decided to stay in the military. And the thing is, during those days, people fought like hell to get into the military. Actually, not in the military, but in a special forces training. They had to qualify like crazy. And they had one thing that my brother didn't. Sea duty. How do you stay in the military that way? I don't know. But he had to have sea duty. He could do some of the training, but the rest of it, he still had to go out in the fleet. Hence his trouble begins in the fleet. One particular ship he was on called the USS McCain. It was an old destroyer that they were going to decommission. So he was on it for about several months to almost a year tour and a thing. He actually made friends, and actually people respected the crap out of him. But there have been times he actually disappeared because of a mission or two or training, more training he had to go through. But at least they didn't hold it against him during those days. Not until he got assigned to the Coral Shit, CVS, what was that? I don't know. Carrier vehicle? Carrier Vehicle Naval 65, if I'm not mistaken. The Ageless Warrior, they called her. Other people called her the Coral Shit. She was a frigate in World War II. Afterwards, they kept the frigate and modified the old girl in dry docks, probably up in Bremerton or somewhere. reformatted the ship from a frigate into an aircraft carrier, keeping most of the structure intact. They slapped the flight deck in the damn thing, kept the boilers running. She was an ugly bastard. Like she was a functional warship. Not exactly a training ship. She was going to be retiring shortly. After about another decade or two, when my brother got on board, he'd be retiring her and turn her into scrap. But until that time, my brother was on board the McCain for as long as she was going to live, because she was also going to be headed for the scrapper. My brother, before he gets over there, Bremerton, he already developed a reputation before he even realized it. Before he gets on board the coral shit, already the chiefs hate his ass. He was assigned to engineering deck. When you're going through the Navy, they give you training. They give you skills. My brother, besides knowing how to kill people, they had to be kept under lock and key. Nobody was supposed to know except for very few commanding officers, somewhere up in the executive branch, would know that he was part of the teams. My brother went through A school, boiler tech. I always joked he learned how to boil water better. My brother also learned how to cook in boot camp. And on a Navy ship, he was assigned to the galleys. All boots get to be assigned to galleys. Actually, no, he wasn't assigned to the galleys on the Coral ship, but on the McCain, before he got put into the engineering spaces. So he was a boiler tech, he was a cook. They all had to cook something. And my brother learned different cooking techniques, and he was actually able to use them at home. How to cook a turkey better. I always forgot where the hell he remembered how to fix a damn turkey. But when my brother joined the SEALs, I didn't realize the community that he was joining himself up with. And the kind of troubles he would have with the crew on board the Coral shit. And the shit happened on there for him. One time they were out in Bremerton. My brother was telling me that he had a flat in Oakland rented out for a time while the ship was going through refit. And some of the people some of the guys he had in the space didn't like his ass at all. Really did not like his ass at all. Harangued my brother. My brother had to hold in his temper. He knew what the hell he could do, and they really didn't want to have any part of it, but they did. My brother told me the story on this one here, how he got injured. These guys jumped my brother in the middle of the night. Started off in his flat. The fight increased, and the body count, not death, but just injured, was increasing during those days. I guess guys don't like to be thrown out of the windows and right into a bramble. Rose bushes can hurt like a son of a bitch. Fight got into the streets. My brother had to survive on that one. He found himself beat up a great deal. And not until he was beating up everybody else in the process. He had to drag himself back over to the base, literally. I'm surprised people late at night wasn't even paying attention to his soldier dragging his bloody car around. He didn't even have access to a phone during those days, unfortunately. If he did, he'd be able to call the base and tell him he needed help. As soon as he got to the damn gate, they called for medics. Actually, called for corpsmen during those days. They still call for corpsmen. They got him into the hospital. Not on board base, but off base. And they really weren't sure if he was going to make it or not. He had to have ear surgery. The eardrum was lying flat. It was supposed to be like this. So he lost hearing in one ear. Good percentage of it, he could still hear out of the damn thing. He identified his attackers. And some of them actually did go through processing and court-martial. Not because of some of the stuff he actually had done in the Navy. That really wasn't one of the things that was really driving him nuts. Not because of the actions taken and also some of the things he had done in the Navy. He got out. I'm trying to be memorable to my brother at this point over here by not dishonoring him in any way, shape, or form. When he was in the Navy, during the time of his tour duties going on and his training in the SEALs, we were losing Aunt May in '79. Dave could have had the opportunity of going, but he didn't hear about it. He was on a mission. And when he came, she was already gone, and the service was already done, and he was really shaken up about that one. He also loved Aunt May a great deal. So did I. And then he hears about Ma and me and Grandma moving over to, or in the process. I think somewhere through connections or channels, we actually had extra help than we realized. Moving stuff from one house to another house. I didn't know who the rest of these guys are. I didn't know who the hell they were. There they are, showing up. I thought I hired these guys. But the way they shove shit around, I didn't think they really knew how to move stuff. It's supposed to be furniture first inside and then the boxes. At least you have your bed set up. And at least we did have the beds set up in that one particular place. We were from Arleta over to Granada Hills during that time. Long stories on those. But my brother was, he also had issues in the military as well. Got him in Hawk a few times. Spent time in the brig. Some guys would laugh about it. My brother didn't make it into a spectacle either. He was trying to get home. He could have just got himself through the discharge, but I guess he really didn't think about it at that time. It's not until we actually had problems with Grandma, when she had a stroke, that my brother decided he had enough. He went through every channel he could get his hands on to get him an emergency leave to help out with Ma while taking care of Grandma. Even tried to get us some help, and we couldn't. The Navy, the Red Cross, the Salvation Army, and God knows who else he'd try to went through. Didn't work. He had already burned up his bridges, and he couldn't get any help anywhere, so he decides to take leave the hard way. Packed up the ship, walked off the Ageless Warrior while I was up in Bremerton and disappeared. Next thing we know, he's at the front door. I was happy. She was wondering what the hell was going on. Normally he would tell us that he would be coming in for leave. Put a lot of pressure on Ma, but she appreciated the help anyway. She was just glad to see her home safe. Dave was home. Dave didn't tell me any of this stuff until decades later what the hell happened. I had to find out through the meeting halls. We have also had talks about this one. Long talks on this. Another vid.